welcome to another edition of Health Solutions with Shawn and Janet Needham, where Team Needham discusses everything healthcare. I'm your host, Shawn Needham, along with my wonderful wife, Janet, and we are streaming live from the Team Needham podcast studio, and we are super excited to have the sex docs on our podcast today. Christina and John are married, and they are in Scottsdale, and they prescribe hormones and talk about sex and healthy sex lives. And they kind of do a lot what Janet and I do. If you guys follow us enough, Janet and I love talking about sex. Who doesn't like talking about sex? And we love talking about how people can thrive and have regular sex into their 80s and 90s. No lie, we'll be talking about that today. We're just super excited to talk about hormones and sex and how people can have a vibrant sex life if they have their hormones optimized. So, John and Christina, welcome to our show.
Hi, thanks for having us. Hello.
So I gave you a quick introduction, but why don't you go ahead and, for our listeners and viewers, introduce yourselves, about your background a little more, and talk about how you got to be here.
Yeah, of course. My name's Dr. John Robinson, and this is my lovely wife, Dr. Christina Romero-Bosch. We're both naturopathic medical doctors. We practice in Scottsdale, Arizona, and we've been practicing now for the past 18 years. And like you had said in the introduction, yes, it's hormone replacement therapy is one of the key things that we focus on, but overall longevity medicine and wellness. And we've been doing that now 18 years. It's been quite a stretch with all of this. And we have found that is usually the reason why somebody comes to see us, what you were saying earlier about sex. It's they want more energy and they want more sex. And that's what we kind of came up with the sex docs concept, not because it just kind of popped into our head one day, but it was based on need. It was based on what patients were wanting from us.
Yeah, definitely. So many people will say to us, oh, do you talk about sex because everybody's having it? And we go, no. We talk about sex because most people aren't having good sex. So That's how we found ourselves to this wonderful niche. And as a couple, we really prioritize that idea of physical intimacy is going to feed your mental, emotional, and spiritual self as well.
Absolutely. So Janet probably has a lot to say about that because she talks a lot about that. To patients. Go ahead and discuss that.
I do, because I think in our culture there's just kind of these forces against intimacy. You know, it's great when you're in your 20s and 30s, but then when you get to your 40s, 50s, and 60s, it's like, right. But what I find in a lot of clients, and especially the women when I'm counseling them, is that, you know, sex really is also a form of communication. I mean, we forget about that. That's a part of your communication between you and your partner. And if it's missing, there's a piece that's missing and you know it. And I really strongly believe that, especially my peri and menopausal, and it could be, you know, earlier in life too, that this can play a role in the destruction of somebody's relationship. Because, you know, if you're not willing and your partner's finding this as being a problem, I think sometimes that leads to the brokenness of relationships.
Yeah, I think that's so interesting you're saying about communication, because we think that good sex really is about yourself first, meaning your best sexual partner is you.
That's right.
But if you don't communicate that to your partner, then they don't know. So it's up to both people to make sure they're talking about what their wants and needs are regarding, let's say, just say the sexual process. It's very, very important to have that communication, but then it's also a communication of expression of yourself and of love as well. That doesn't even have to necessarily always be about actual intercourse, but it is about the intimacy of communication.
Yeah, and I would agree. I think at least in American modern culture, although I would venture to say that probably we're seeing this more and more throughout the world, this hyper sexuality and that we're seeing as the norm is not representative of how sexually dissatisfied people are at any age, and it's not representative of the lack of intimacy that we are seeing as a modern phenomenon that is really damaging every aspect of a person's health and wellness, their health and wellness as a couple, and as John is saying, their health as an individual.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing I say often is that, you know, if you're not having regular sex with your significant other, with your spouse, then really you're essentially just roommates. And I know a lot of people are really gonna I'm gonna be hated for saying that, but seriously, that's really what separates us as being just friends. I mean, you can still be friends but not have sex, but if you're not, that's what separates us as a married couple is being intimate.
That's right, Shawn. Thank you for saying that. I agree. I think it's definitely not a popular concept. A lot of people will get upset about it. I think, unfortunately, a lot of there's this idea that it's usually the women who aren't wanting to have sex, and that's not true, John, right? That's actually, in our practice, we tend to see that a lot of times it's the other way around, right?
Yes, or either the guys are, or having an inability, and once a guy has any level of issue downstairs, then that starts to affect his ego and how he's feeling, and then people go without it. I mean, back to what you were even saying, whether it is men or women, I think as people are getting older and they start to have the physical issues that don't allow them to have sex, whether that's vaginal dryness or erectile dysfunction for men, then they just kind of go, I don't have to have it. They learn to live without it. I mean, patients say that all the time. I don't know, I just learned to live without it, and then they accept their fate.
Yeah, they resign.
Yeah, and they resign.
And this concept of desire to have sex, it's so multifactorial. We will often talk about the idea of libido and how libido isn't just libido for sex. Libido is really that desire, that fervor, that passion for life. And if you start having a diminishing libido, one of the easiest places to see it is I'm just not as interested in sex with my partner anymore. I love them, I find them to be attractive, I still care for them deeply, but I'm just not that interested. Then we usually find ourselves that we're prodding a little bit deeper and saying, okay, well, what else are you not that interested in? Because they tend to go hand in hand.
Yeah, that is absolutely true. And going back onto kind of how this manifests or progresses, and from my experience when talking to men and talking to women, I like what John said about usually it's, when men start having health issues in their 40s and 50s where, their libido drops. Now, unfortunately, you guys might be seeing the same thing. We're seeing that younger and younger now in men. Yes. I mean, we're seeing 20, 30 and 20-year-old men that have, low testosterone, decreased libido, erectile dysfunction. And I mean, that's a scary thing to think about, because when you're in your 20s as a man, you should not be having those kind of issues.
Yeah.
So
it's a global decline. Back in 2017, I had the opportunity to speak in London, and the topic that I spoke on was the global decline of testosterone and sperm in men. And I wrote a paper about it and sort of presented that, and that was back then, and we were seeing. It was very clear even then with the understanding of the research that there was this 3-generational decline of both testosterone and sperm in men, inevitably, and then of course affecting libido. So we've seen this. It's a problem, and it's multifactorial. There's a lot of reasons why it's happening. The air we're breathing, the food we're eating, the food we're not eating, pesticides, phthalates, and other things found in plastics. I even kind of go into the concepts of some of the psychological reasons. We don't push towards winning, and the concept of winning, and even those things affect testosterone in men. So competition and those types of things. So there's an overarching physical and societal thing that's leading into all of that. And now I think with this younger generation, now I'd say Gen Z is becoming of age where they're having sex. They're not having sex anywhere near the way our generation would be or our parents' generation were.
And the testosterone is not just a man hormone. I mean, it's extremely important in women. Like Janet, like what you were saying, we're getting perimenopausal females, and the reaction through most conventional physicians, and I'll say there's even naturopaths out there who treat very conventionally. And they say, oh, you're past your reproductive years. Like, what do you actually need that for? Well, I don't know. Heart health, bone health, mental clarity, the prevention of chronic disease. How about everything? Quality of life. It's such a ridiculous notion. So sex and sex hormone replacement is not about just having sex. It's about what sex means as part of a healthy life, like you're pointing out.
So many practitioners. Oh, excuse me. Go ahead.
No, you're fine. I agree with that.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of practitioners that are quite lazy. I mean, when you were saying all of it, there's often a lack of an imagination or willingness to move forward. And we see this, what we were saying, naturopath, you see with conventional doctors, pharmacists, whatever, they go, I don't know. because they don't know the answer, they say, well, then you should just live with it. Because if I had the answer, I'd tell the answer. But since I don't have the answer, I'm just going to say, let's all resign and say, there's nothing you can do about it, live with it.
Or they don't have time in the first place to listen to the questions. I mean, you have to be an investigator. The body is this beautiful, it's so sophisticated, and I love what we do. And it's like a puzzle, you know, the person comes in and they're like, let's have a play day, and they put this puzzle on your desk, but it's like those puzzle pieces that are a million pieces and they all look alike. So you really have to have patience and curiosity and interest, and you have to investigate what are the true causes of the problem. If you're in a medical practice where you don't have an opportunity to take the time to ask those questions, it's very overwhelming and it's very dissatisfactory. So you just say next, you know, you move on to the next thing.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So when we talk about regular sex, so let's define regular sex. What is regular sex?
I think it comes down to what it's very individualistic, I think, but the general research will show that around 2 times a week is this sort of average that tends to serve the couple relatively well, at least a couple of times a week. And that's coming together in some way intimately a couple of times a week. With all of that said, I mean, you know, let's see how we can have more of that. I think some of that comes down to libido. Meaning, libido means psychological desire and drive to want to have sex. Then there's the actual act. I think a lot of people are just walking around without even a libido. I don't even want to. So even if you're walking around with the desire, knowing that eventually sometime within that week or so you're going to have sex, I think that's helpful too. But I don't know, what would you say? How many times?
Well, I mean, the literature suggests 2 to 3 times is the average, and thereby they're defining that as what's normal and healthy. I think that that's grossly skewed. I think when I tell patients 2 to 3 times a week, they're like, how about 2 to 3 times a month or I mean, really, 1 time a month for a lot of couples is what's normal. It's not normal. Maybe it's common. That doesn't make it normal. So I would start by saying that that's baloney. So I think John's explanation of it's very individualized, it's what's right for the couple, is important. But I don't know that we should rely on libido. And I don't know, it's kind of like willpower. It never really shows up when you need it. So you got to do it anyway. Like John will often say to people, just practice, fake it, do it anyway until it becomes real. And that's true with sex as well. You almost have to have a conversation as a couple to be committed to this contract of frequency, so that even if you're not in the mood, because once you get going, most people will say, yes, it's satisfactory.
Once I get going. Right.
And that in and of itself will feed libido, right?
Yeah, we've got a challenge. We say the 30-day challenge. So we'll challenge patients to say, no matter what, no matter how long it is, you don't have to, it's not a production, but do it at least once per day for 30 days. And it can be really profoundly influencing to the intimacy of a patient's, of their couple sort of nature of themselves. It's really profound.
Well, it's kind of like exercise in a way.
Yeah.
You know, if you commit, if you schedule it and you commit to do it every day for 30 days, whatever that exercise is, you realize how much better you feel.
Oh, yeah.
And you just keep doing it and you get into a routine of it. So I know there are some people that they schedule sex, and I don't think that's a bad idea at all.
I think it's a great idea. I mean, I think when people first get involved in a relationship, everything's spontaneous. It feels that way. But once there's life, there's a job and career and kids. All of these things necessitate that kind of penciling it in, so to speak. And I think that does help.
Yeah, when I was younger, I remember Shawn and I now. We started dating when I was 25, and I'm 46 now, so that's good chunk of my life. And I would be like, scheduling date night? That's terrible. That's couples who don't prioritize each other, blah, blah, blah. Right. I mean, let me be the first to tell the young listeners out there, there's absolutely nothing wrong about having structure in your life, because actually that's habit. And whenever you have a habit, what do they say? It's 3 days to fall out of a habit, but 3 weeks to establish one. And that's pretty darn true. So if you create the habit of sexual intimacy, then you will find that you have more and more time and more conscious desire to have the sex, because you're not always in the mood, but maybe your heart is in the mood or your brain is in the mood. Like you think, God, we haven't been together in 4 days. Let's make sure we do that. And just let it unfold that way. It doesn't always have to be this romantic escapade.
Yeah, performance. Right?
Yeah, performance.
But
right.
there certainly are physical things that get in the way of libido, both, again, for men and women. And I think we were going to maybe talk about some of those things as it relates to hormones and those types of things.
Yeah, Janet, you got some stories about women and vaginal dryness.
So I'm throwing the medical community under the bus on this one, because it isn't just couples that say, oh, well, and are defeated. It's also our medical community that says, if it hurts, here's some lidocaine, and and I've had multiple women come to me. And one actually was a couple. The gentleman came in with his wife, and he was like, this feels, excuse me, this feels almost on the border of rape. If I know my partner is not comfortable and enjoying what we are doing together, I have issues with this. I am not comfortable with what we were just told. I'm like, yeah, I don't either. Let's find somebody who can help you.
Right.
So let's just kind of talk, I think, from the female perspective of some of the things that we recommend to women because it does happen as we age with some women, that we do have some irritation and dryness.
Right. That's impactful. Yeah.
Well, step one, some form of assessment of their hormonal status. Particularly, we think of estrogen, and I think that's obviously priority when it comes to the vaginal vault. But my mentor, who was an OBGYN, would say testosterone rules the vulva, and that includes DHEA. So when you're balancing, let's say, those three things, and we could throw in progesterone there, then now you're having more direct vaginal health. So and what I mean by that is also internal, taking the hormones somehow internally, getting it into the system, and regulated that way, but then directly affecting the tissues of the vagina with topical creams, and these kind of things can be fantastic. And that's how we tend to kind of approach it. Get the levels regulated internally, while in the immediacy, I always say, I'm not into suffering. I want my patients to get out of suffering as quickly as possible. So we'll do something topical for them in the meantime, while the hormones are regulating internally. And that tends to, most of the time it tends to do it.
And that's a good point about using the topical. The topical in lieu of systemic hormone replacement. Again, we're talking about sex hormone replacement, because really, just as a quick tangent, when we're thinking of things even like vaginal dryness, sex hormones are just the elephant in the room, but really, usually you need to delve a little bit deeper. What are the other hormonal systems doing? What's the gut doing, etc.? But focusing on the sex hormones, the creams are going to give some palliative relief to the local area, but I don't find that you're going to get the type of deep healing that a person needs using creams alone. So usually systemic replacement, whether it's pellets or injections, I think are our preference. That tends to be necessary when you're having that degree of tissue sensitivity and friability.
Sure, but you of course can achieve those serum levels through creams. You can do it through troches and lozenges and these kind of things. But the main thing is to get the levels up, keep them up, and then affect the tissue. The other thing that we do is something called the O shot, if you're familiar. This is using platelet-rich plasma. We draw blood from a patient, we separate out the active growth factors that are found in everybody's blood, and then we can strategically inject that into the structures of the vagina. We can do it with the penis, that's called the P shot. But with the O shot, we're putting that into the anterior vaginal wall and into the clitoris after they're extremely numb. I always like to make sure I'm saying that as quickly as possible. You're extremely numb. And then we're applying that platelet-rich plasma, and that can also regenerate the tissue if the hormones don't actually do it. We always start with that. That's the foundation of the whole thing. But knowing that there's an additional answer is really relieving for a lot of patients, and that is sometimes the route that we go.
Yeah, we've heard a lot about the O shot and a lot of good feedback. And I do agree with you. I think first and foremost, you have to address the hormone issue. Um, and back on the story that Janet was saying about, the 50-year-old woman that walked in with her husband, that doctor also said that, well, it's just part of aging. As we get older, sex isn't as important. And I mean, that's a complete lie. And I
Yes.
tell patients, if a doctor tells you that, you leave immediately and you go get a
Yes.
doctor.
Go find another doctor.
I mean, seriously. And here's what I like to say about it. I mean, not that we didn't have good sex in our 20s, but after you've been together for 20 or 30 years and you're in your 50s and, you're empty nesters, you're more financially secure than you've probably ever been. You've known each other better than you've ever have. It's the best time to have the best sex of your life. I mean, for sure. So you really need to make sure that you are having the best sex of your life. And if you're not, you need to address that issue.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And that happens, right? We were saying that timing, that sort of 50 odd, is right when most people, the average menopausal age in the United States is 51. Guys are dealing with their issues. It's something really kind of special, roughly about that age of 50. So that's when they should be, okay, now I've got the time, I've got the means, I've got the will to kind of fix this. Go in and find the practitioners that are going to be able to help you.
Yeah, because you do need partners, and just a shout out to you both that our compounding pharmacist that he's not around anymore, but when we first started, what an incredible source of information and guidance and expertise, because he was significantly older than us back then. And I thought, gosh, some of the best training and learning we got was from our pharmacist. So really the purpose of that is, aside to say bravo to you both, is to say patients really need to think outside of the box and surround themselves with people that are going to give them information that truly resonates. If you're having information from your health practitioner that is making you feel like your worries or your questions are dumb, then that's like a flashing yellow light that you got to move on. Doesn't mean that you're dumb. It doesn't even mean that they're dumb. It just means that's not the right choice for you. So I would say quickly move on.
Yeah, and it is. It's not maybe maybe they are dumb a lot of times, these practitioners,
Right.
but they're unimaginative and they're unwilling. They're sort of ensconced inside their own box and they can't get out of it. And that's just not what medicine is about. That's not what healing and health is about. It's supposed to be imaginative. I always say to my patients, healing is always an option, and we approach it from that perspective. That we're gonna figure this out. I don't know how we're gonna do it. We're gonna figure it out. And you give that level of hope, and you keep digging in. A lot of times too, and I don't know what with your example there, Janet, in the 50-year-old patient, if her practitioner, it was an OBGYN, was younger than her. Because I've seen this with some of these younger kids coming out of school, and even females. You would think the females would be more understanding. A lot of times they're like worse than the guys in a certain way, because they go, nah, you don't need that, or I've read that they start talking about breast cancer and all those kind of things, and they just sort of resign and go, no, there's nothing you can do. You shouldn't do any of that.
You're old. This is
yes,
it.
but I've seen those same patients come back to me and say, well, that I stuck with that OBGYN. Well, now she got a little bit older, and now she's saying, what's the name of that guy that you see?
Right, that's
Who's
right.
that?
I need a referral.
Right. Yeah. Help.
Yeah.
We've been doing this long enough where we've seen it. We got called crazy 20-some years ago by certain doctors. Then all of a sudden, when they're at the age or their wives are at the age, they're like, hey, I got some questions for you.
That's right.
Funny how that works.
Yeah, that's true. The other piece about the story that you share that's so important to know is that the man, the husband, was so genuinely interested in the enjoyment of his wife. This is a piece that brings a lot of couples in, because women will often report to me, talking about libido again, my husband is starting to get worried or frustrated that I'm not having an orgasm. He's starting to think the problem is him, or the problem is the relationship. And that's very untrue in most cases, right? If they're coming to us saying, can you help me with this? It's usually because they want their husband to be equally pleased. Men will report, right, Shawn, that it's very difficult for them to enjoy their orgasms if they find that their partner is not equally enjoying.
Sure. And that for a lot of guys, they are interpreting, I think, orgasm, or back to this other the gentleman who said it felt like it was rape, meaning because guys, they want to know that their generally speaking, they want to know that their partner is pleased. That's part of making them feel good about the whole process. And I think that's probably reciprocal too. But I think for guys, that is really important. It's part of their sort of, I think, identity sexually, to know that they're able to please their partner, for sure. And there's sometimes reasons as to why somebody can't have an orgasm. It can be mental and emotional, of course, and sometimes we delve into those things, but there can be certain hormonal imbalances that are leading even into that. Or back to the O shot, where sometimes the O shot can really kind of takes that ability to have an orgasm to the next level. But again, just testosterone, estrogen, making sure those things are balanced. All of a sudden, someone sort of goes, "Oh, well, I'm able to have an orgasm again." Sometimes there can be prolactin issues, and so we'll measure prolactin. If that's super elevated, sometimes that can be a problem. There's ways to handle that. So yeah, we got to look at the whole picture.
And we'll use also oxytocin, which is compounded, right, to help the person feel more able to experience that intimacy. They're going to have less tension in their body because,
she lost an earbud.
I lost an earbud. I knew that was going to happen. It's very different to be the penetrator versus to be penetrated. And if a female is having a lot of physical tightness and tension, then she's going to have a much harder time enjoying sex.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And I think one thing we need to remember too is, it's important to communicate with your partner how you define sex, for one. And I think John kind of alluded to it early in the show, that, it's not always about the, what would you call it? The finish. It's about the destination too.
Yes.
You got to define that. So I think sometimes, whether it be women or men, get so hung up on the orgasm part that they don't realize that it's the whole process that's enjoyable, not necessarily just the orgasm. Not that that can't be, but you don't have to end every sex session with an orgasm, whether it be female or male.
Or male.
Correct?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yes. One of the things that we have practiced, we'll have our patients practice, is literally that, like stopping yourself right before the point, and when you can do that for a number of sessions or days, and that can really make that, when you finally do have that orgasm, it can make it that much more intense. But there's argument to say that holding in Chinese medicine, they call it the jing, or the essence. I mean, holding in that to some degree has some health benefit, some longevity health benefit of that. So there's something called injaculation that particularly a guy can do. There's putting pressure on the perineum, the area just underneath the scrotum, to allow yourself to orgasm but not to ejaculate, which there can be ways to kind of play around with that.
Yeah.
But that's getting maybe a little bit fancy. But to your point, it doesn't have to be that. I think sex starts with, and this is something I think a lot of guys need to figure out, it starts with that connection in the early part of the day with your partner. That sort of just walking by, touching a leg, smacking her butt, little things that just sort of lead into that, or doing something that's caring, getting that cup of tea for her. All those things are leading into it's the foreplay kind of concept.
I made my wife's coffee this morning.
You see?
Check. Right. I like that. Yeah.
I mean, we're laughing about it, but those steps go far, far in boosting your partner's libido.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
it's so
and
interesting.
things, just like you say, simple things, all day long. Like Jen and I try to make a conscious effort to shower together every morning. It just starts the way it starts. You can't shower with your clothes on, so it just starts a good part of the day. And then throughout the day, we try to just communicate, even if we're not at work together, which we're normally not. I mean, we're texting back and forth, and sexting, saying some naughty stuff. Are you coming home for lunch? What do you want for dinner? Things like that. And that's the whole process of flirting throughout the day. Even though we've been together for over 30 years, we still do that. And it makes the whole sex process better.
Yeah.
And it makes it part of your everyday life. It doesn't make it about the moments that you're actually having orgasm. If you're having sex in the every moment, then you have an active, healthy sex life. And then that's particularly important as people age, because if there is, let's say, betrayal of the anatomy, like let's say there really start to be functional anatomical problems like erectile dysfunction as a result of surgery or things like that, we have to still understand that sexual intimacy is still going to be present in your life. If you prioritized it from the beginning, then you will have it for always. But it is a garden that needs to be tended to.
Yeah, that's
So-
a really, really good analogy. Yeah. So as we wrap this podcast up, I'm going to stream your guys' website. Tell us a little bit about your website. And you guys have a podcast also, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So this is our private practice in Scottsdale, Arizona. It's called the Hormone Zone, and we're in North Scottsdale. And we also have a podcast. The name of our podcast is the Longevity Protocol Podcast, and we have a website in development for that as well, thelongevityprotocol.com. And what we're doing, just as it says here, bespoke offerings, premier solutions, and we're very results-driven people, so we're really results-driven for our patients. And it's a full suite of services surrounding wellness. Of course, the Hormone Zone, the name largely gives it away. We're focusing on hormone replacement therapy, but it goes far beyond that. I know earlier we were mentioning gut health and those types of things. We certainly focus on that, all different types of hormones, adrenal health, thyroid. We've developed a unique system called Thyrazone that is a unique sort of diagnostic and treatment approach to thyroid that's very much outside of the box of the conventional approach, and many other things. So all things longevity to be able to help with health span, lifespan, and part of that inevitably is sex.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So as we wind this podcast up, tell us what you guys have a passion for.
Each other.
Yes.
I
Number one.
love it, right?
Yeah, I think
it's
each
awesome.
other.
We do so many things together. We work together. This to us that we're doing right now, we do not look at like this at work. I mean, aside from the fact that you're all extremely lovely to talk to, and it's been super entertaining. We don't see this as work. This is date night for us, so to speak, and that's we're passionate about each other, and we're very passionate about what we do. About being we always say that we don't help patients, we serve them, and because we see it as a higher calling. Like you don't help in the Army, you serve in the Army, in the military. So we see it as something that's really, really necessary out there, and really exciting to be part of a resurgence. I think right now, currently, the culture's really waking up towards these types of things even more, and I've been involved in wellness now for over 30 years, so to see this, that's what I think we're passionate about, is a message that we've been saying for a very long time, that now people are, through podcasts and these types of things, really waking up.
Yeah, I would say, to piggyback on that, is we're extremely passionate about demonstrating relationships like yours, relationships like ours, because this is not a myth. This is not the unicorn, the fabled unicorn.
Right.
What it is an active engagement in your own health, active engagement in your partners, active engagement in the relationship as its own entity. If there's one thing aside from each other that we're most dedicated to, which of course each other includes our family, is going to be demonstrating to the world around us that life is meant to be lived well.
Yes.
For as long as possible. So let's enjoy together, learn from each other, and joy and health and goodness are very contagious. But find a partner that will help, find a health partner that will help you and your intimate partner make that a reality for you as well.
Absolutely. Absolute truth. You guys have so much in common with us. We got to meet you guys in person sometime.
Yes.
For sure.
We look forward
We
to
would
it.
love that, definitely. Thank you
So
again
you
so much.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for being on and helping us realize our goal, which is to educate and empower individuals to take charge of their own health. So thank you for helping us realize that goal.
Thank you. Have a very Merry Christmas, and we hopefully see you soon.
And hang on till after the podcast. We can chat just a few minutes off air.
Sure.
Okay, sounds good.
Thanks
Thank
again.
you both. Bye-bye.
Yeah. And listeners and viewers, thank you for tuning in to Health Solutions with Shawn and Janet Needham. Tune into our regularly scheduled podcast, 12:30 to 1:30 Monday Pacific Standard Time. Thank you.